Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Afternoons with the Ambassador. Glad y'all could tune in this afternoon. Hope y'all are doing well. And with me, as usual, I've got my good friend Adega, and we're going to be continuing our Babylon 5 series review, and we're going to be talking about the War Prayer. And to everyone that's coming into the chat, Finn Wolf, Mountains of Elysium, and Number One Sci-Fi, greetings. Glad you all could be here today. And hope you all enjoy the stream. Hope you all are doing well and everything. And hope y'all are surviving the lockdown. Hopefully for a lot of us, this lockdown will be ending soon and we all can get back out into the world and to one extent or another. So, Dega, as always, it's good to have you here, my friend. How are you doing today?
I am doing really well. Better that I got to talk to you beforehand. I appreciate your advice.
You're welcome, as always. So, well, this is actually a really interesting episode, in this just in the simple fact that it deals with a couple of really interesting topics, and it does so in a very, I think, creative and way that's accessible to everybody. One is the whole idea of dealing with racism, or in this case, speciesism, in the terms of the Babylon 5 universe, but also it deals with how do I want to word this? The concept of arranged marriages, in terms of the storyline and everything with Alondo and Veer's cousin and his girlfriend. So this is actually a good episode. You have a little bit of world building because you've got that one scene with Sinclair and Kosh when Sinclair goes to talk to Kosh about the attacks that have happened there on the station and what have you. And as always, Kosh is a man of few words, but those words always seem to carry weight. So, Adega, where would you like to start with this episode?
At least for me, it gives a lot of world building more for one of the key races, more so than most. I think people underestimate it. They look at Londo, but the Centauri actually are one of the more pivotal. I mean, they start the war. They have to help end the war. They have the lasting effects of the war more than any other species. And to find out more about how their government works, how their family works, how their arranged marriage is, you find out here in this one that Londo has what's it called, famine, pestilence, and death. Is the name
his
of
three
his
wives.
Three wives, and he doesn't care for any of them. They are all arranged for political gains. It speaks a lot to what we are learning about what the Centauri are. They're a proud race, steeped in tons of tradition. We learned a little bit about their gods. Now we learn about
their society.
Yep. And that love often in their society, much like our own royal societies, takes a back seat to honor and duty.
Yes, very much so. And the other interesting thing is I love the fact that we get to see a little bit more of a vulnerable side of Londo in this episode when he's talking to Veer there in one of the gardens. And Veer, this is another character building moment for Veer, because he's like, Ambassador, you're wrong. It doesn't. Our people don't just live without love. And to the chat, Mountains of Elysium, no, that's a couple of episodes down the road where we first meet Narun. I think that's in the episode. I can't remember the title of it, but it's the one where they're bringing one of the big generals that has died and everything through all the big stations and planets and what have you and everything all the way back to the Minbari homeworld. Fennel Wolf. Yeah, that's a great line. My shoes are too tight, and I've forgotten how to dance. The line that his father says to him later on. And I love how they are able to interweave both all the storylines that are in the same, because you've got the main storyline, and that's the attacks on the alien races on the station, which is kind of which is honestly, I think, a very interesting way in dealing with how our society, particularly in the 90s and even nowadays, deals with racial relations and what have you. And not to mention, it also interweaves Londo and Veers and the other two Centauri, Chiron and Arya, or anything, the two younger Centauri and what have you. And of course, you've got the other storyline and everything, which is Susan Ivanova rekindling her relationship with Malcolm Briggs, I think his name was. The name of the character. And they're able to weave all these stories together, and they do so wonderful, so very, very well. And something that you mentioned, Adaga, was we get some more world building, society building with the Centauri, but we also get very much with the Minbari, particularly with the opening of the episode where you've got Delenn and Shah Mayan and everything, who is a Minbari poet and what have you, and their interaction together is just it's really nice how you have the sense that these two Minbari, these two women, have had a lifelong friendship, and it has carried on into their adult years. Although they have drifted apart somewhat, they do still keep relatively close ties, and that's actually a nice touch. And I love the fact that we get to see that fiery side of Delenn again, because that's one of her. I think that's one of her stronger, most impressive aspects of her character. So, I dig it. Your thoughts on anything I just said?
No, I have to agree, but that's something that seems pretty typical with Minbari, but is very much in common with most of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
You don't piss them off unless you're ready to fight with a honey badger. And
or as
Delenn is definitely, I don't know, most of you probably know what a honey badger is. It's a type of badger that is extremely violent, doesn't care how big you are, and they have been known to bring down bull cows by chasing them and chewing off their balls. I mean, that's a honey badger, and that's what they really do. And Delenn is every bit of that, as is with most of, even the religious caste tend to fight.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to quote a Vulcan who quoted the Andorian, "Do not push the pink skins too close to the thin ice." Which, if you're a fan of Axanar, you'll get that reference. I think Adago will get that reference himself. But yeah, the Minbari are very passionate people, and the thing that's one of the great aspects about them is their passion, is their drive, and what have you. And to the chat, Max World Entertainment, welcome, Loki. Good afternoon. Glad you gentlemen could pop in and join the stream for a little bit. Hope you enjoy. So. Mountains of Elysium, don't feel bad. Yeah, this episode, the title can be somewhat misleading, but I think the title actually is very telling of what all the topics that are being discussed in this episode, because in a lot of ways, the Minbari and the Centauri both are very passionate people, and their passions and their tempers can be inflamed very, very easily in a lot of ways. And I love, honestly, how Delenn, she doesn't do it to the point of being cringy, but she kind of dresses down Mr. Garibaldi at the beginning of this episode, where she tells him, well, there was a time when a person could walk through Green Sector and not worry about being attacked in the middle of the night. Because Garibaldi says, well, he's like, Shah Mayan refused any type of escort or anything while she was here on the station. And you would think, being she's in the ambassador, this is actually the first time we hear this term, the ambassadorial wing of the station, that she would be relatively safe walking from Delenn's quarters back to her own, because they're probably in the same wing of the station and everything, and somehow or another she is attacked there. And, I think that is a very, I think that is a pertinent, I think that's kind of a pertinent moment in a manner of speaking, because you can't plan for every eventuality. You can't have all, you could even make the argument that even though if Shah Mayan had accepted a security escort, the attack may have happened regardless. So you just can't know every eventuality that's going to happen on a station that size.
There's a reason why we call things the in the shadows, or the dark side, or the hidden part of the ego. When you're out, whether it be in this case alien, or whether you're anyone else, most people, the vast majority of people, their brains, their focus, what they see in the world doesn't look in the shadows. Figuratively speaking, they don't look for the dark side. They don't have that as part of their nature.
Yeah.
And so walking a dark corridor on a space station full of military security, the average person wouldn't think that there's something sinister ready to get them.
Yeah.
Now, there's a long story. I could do that another time about how people innately can listen to those type of things and avoid it. But for this story, and it goes with, I had read that quote to you from Mark Twain. The title of this, and I picked this up from a little trivia bit. The title of this, The War Prayer, it was actually from a Mark Twain story set just before his death. And at the time, there was a lot of saber rattling because, World War I was about ready to happen and people were on edge. And his basic thing was, when you start a war, you do violence, you're doing it to other people. It isn't the hidden enemy. It isn't the evil that exists in another country. It's people. Maybe they have a bad leader who can't wipe his own butt and insists on other countries do it for him. But when you pull up the bayonet, you're facing down someone who is just like you. And the title of this is pretty much, and it goes not only with Delenn and her friend, or Londo, or even with Ivanova. They're facing other conscious sentient beings, and it's our duty to stay out of those shadows and actually see them for who they are. And that was one of the big things both the poet and Londo were, and Fiona brought it up, it was, my shoes are too, it took me a while to actually understand this. I mean, you get the basic understanding, but to get the depth of it, it was, Straczynski was pretty sharp with this. Yes, my shoes are too tight. I have forgotten how to dance. Well, what are the shoes? Obligations, responsibilities, the day-to-day honors for the Centauri, but it could be anybody, where you let your obligations have you so focused on things that aren't important, where to dance, to be happy and dancing usually involves other people.
Yes.
You can do it without shoes altogether.
Well, and, the interesting, that is actually a very interesting insight. And it was something that I picked up on, not when I originally watched this episode, but it's something that I picked up on as I've gotten older and I've gotten more world experience and more life experience and everything. Because we can get kind of stuck in our day-to-day life that we forget to take our shoes off and dance, to kind of just not so much forget all our obligations, but kind of just set our obligations aside for a little while and just kind of enjoy life and live life and breathe and just kind of set aside the troubles of the world, set aside the troubles, if we're able to, of our own lives, and just say, I am going to live in this moment. I am going to enjoy my life. I'm going to enjoy the people that I have in my life, whether it's family or friends or whoever, and whether they are in a real space or a virtual space like YouTube or Twitter or Discord or whatever. And just say, you know what? There's a lot more good in this world than there is bad. Because you're always going to have the negs. You're going to always have the cynics and the critics who are going to just try and suck the life out of everything. And Londo, in a lot of ways, is kind of like that at the beginning of this episode. He is the cynic. He is the neg. He is the negative person for a while. And then he's sitting there in that garden, and he's very much contemplating what his father said to him years and years ago when he was younger, and he's realizing that he is stifling Veer's cousin and his girlfriend slash fiance. And honestly, I love the resolution to that story and everything, and I love how they tie Shawmayan into that resolution, because she's there in the med bay with Dr. Franklin. You've got Kieran and after the attack by the speciesists. I don't want to call them racist, but these are speciesists. It's an anti-alien group and everything, or members of an anti-alien group that have come from Earth. They're there on Babylon 5. And he's like, and Shawmayan says something very pertinent and poignant to him and saying, look, the boy may die. If she's not here with him, her grief and her remorse will be even longer if she's not with her. She's still going to go through that grief if he dies, but it won't be quite as protracted and quite as long. And I think what Shawmayan said to Londo did very much resonate with him, not in that particular moment, but it did. I mean, you see it off screen in a manner of speaking. Okay, you see it. You don't see it on screen. You see it off screen, but you see him sitting there in that garden, and you almost get the idea that he has taken what she is saying to heart, and he's relating it to something that happened in his own life, and is saying, "Yeah, you know what? These two kids, they deserve a chance to have a happy life." And he comes up with actually a very ingenious solution called fosterage and everything, which, for those of you that might not be terribly familiar with the whole Babylon 5 universe and the Centauri society, essentially this was something that happened back in the old days and everything of the Republic, where younger people would be fostered by well-to-do, higher up families or whatever within the Centauri society. And Londo got in touch with his second cousin and said, "Hey, I got these two kids. They're wanting to get married for love. Can you help them?" And obviously the second cousin, Andillo, says, "Sure, I'll help them out. Happy to." And I love the fact that Veer is boning up and he's studying Centauri society, and Londo gives him his props. And I think that too is a very nice moment. So, and to the chat, Rambling Canuck, good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. Glad to see you. So, Adega, any thoughts on anything that I just said?
Well, I wanted to do like you did, though, real quick. Say hi to Loki. Okay. Kathy, I call her my sis because she's a better version, but very similar to my real world sis. And to Trey, if he's still around, he bounces around. I have a message for you. I've done some considering, and Ambassador put the nail in the coffin, so you need to read that message for you. But no, I have to agree with you. It was, in a lot of ways, Londo feeling bad about where his life had taken him and not wanting to let a child or two children suffer through life for honor and duty. And he had the ability to do basically like a regal apprenticeship for them, so that these people who were born out of the system could actually have a chance to be lifted up and be given a chance where they wouldn't have ordinarily had without having to sacrifice love or happiness.
Yeah, and to Mountains of Elysium, your comment right here, that make an interesting what if. I don't know if Valari would have given more than the same answer and everything if he had come to him in this episode, because I think it's not this episode, but it's the episode after this one. Everything, A Sky Full of Stars, which is the next one we'll be reviewing, is I think Signs and Portents, where Morden does come to the station. I think maybe Malari would have been. I don't think he would have been as fired up and hot and everything if Morden had come to him during this particular episode. And he may not have given him the same answer.
I have to agree with you, because when Londo actually did give Morden the answer, it was only after his country was under threat.
Yeah,
it had nothing to do about his own personal life, because he's been ups and downs with his own life all the time, and he never asked Morden to do stuff for him personally. It was for his world.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of getting into the main topic of the episode, this whole idea of this anti-alien movement that has spread up on Earth and Mars and a few other worlds, and has infiltrated onto Babylon 5. I don't know of another sci-fi show, at least to the best of my memory, that has handled this topic of race relations as well as this one episode does here. Because you see the vehement hatred of other alien races through Malcolm Briggs and the others that are working with him, and the other guy and everything that gets attacked by the two Drazi and everything midway through the episode. And you see Jakar being Jakar once again. The thing you have to remember, Jakar is like an onion. He has lots and lots of layers. He is not one note. One moment he can be very fiery and very vindictive, like he is in this episode, and very passionate. And I don't think that's necessarily, it's an unfounded or unwarranted position, but I think what he was doing was only inflaming the situation rather than trying to make the situation better or make it more manageable for Sinclair and so on. But honestly, this episode, I think, very much handles in a very constructive and a very pertinent way, in a very relatable way, the whole idea of interracial relations in our current society. Because for all the advancements that we have made, there are still those out there who still want to bang the war drum of inflaming and making race relations negative and everything within our society. And you very much get that impression with the anti-alien characters in this episode, because even Malcolm Briggs, the guy that used to date Ivanova, she didn't see him for what he really was. At least you get the impression he may not have always been like this.
Well, he mad at as well. It was kind of going back to that point where I said people don't look for that. The average person doesn't expect to see something so dark, know. And with any type of racism or hearing, like interspecies issues, these people always have the same underlying thing. There's something inside them that feels threatened or inferior. Instead of trying to lift up the whole, they take other life as an insult to themselves, because for some reason they hate a little secret part of themselves, something inside that they feel should be better, And instead of taking responsibility for it, they blame it on somebody else, and they fixate on it. And that fixation festers until it becomes the hatred. Oh, and side point, so I don't forget. This Malcolm guy, the one who is Ivanova's boyfriend, I wish they... Don't get me wrong, when he's a bad guy, he's a bad guy, but when he first comes on, he just looks like a slime ball to me to begin with. I don't know why.
Yeah, no.
He's irritating. I wish they had a better actor for it, because they scraped the bottom of the barrel to get this guy. I don't know if it was by design, but I hated him from the beginning.
He did seem... I can see your point. I can agree that he did seem kind of off-putting, but then again, as people are getting out into the dating arena, this may have been a poor choice on Obama's part, because let's be honest here, her track record, as she says herself, hasn't been the best. I mean, she says that in that speech and everything after the death of Marcus Cole. There was nothing to them. There was no warmth, no depth. They're all just empty. And you very much get this impression that this Malcolm Briggs guy was one of those early flames, one of those early romances, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, because he does seemingly come off as very one note. Not so much as the other character, Roberts, I think was the last name of the one guy that gets attacked and everything. I forget his first name, but I know they refer to him as Roberts. And he's very one note as well. And
we didn't get to see a lot of him because he was captured by Garibaldi, so he's going to put on his smug little face. You're right, it was one note, but I would imagine any crook or someone who's hiding crimes is going to put on that one note anyway. Yeah,
very true. And I won't lie. When they get the one diplomat and everything towards the end of the episode, and it's a loyalty test for Sinclair and everything, and Briggs is making his big long speech and everything about they're going to take out all of the ambassadors there on Babylon 5, and he's like, Delin, Shakar, Malari, and Kosh, and I'm thinking, yeah, you're going to take out Kosh. He'll wipe the floor with the whole bunch of you in 2 seconds.
Right.
I'm thinking, yeah, you're going to take out a Vorlon with your little PPG rifles. Even when they take out Yulkesh, they have a hard time. And that's when they pull out all the stops, quite literally, and everything to take him out.
Well, they wouldn't have done it if Lorianne wasn't there. They wouldn't have done it if a piece of Kosh was there. He would have wiped the floor with him even then. Yeah, precisely. There is no way in there. You know what? I laugh every time I hear that little speech and they get in. He says, and Kosh. And I'm like, you are so toast if you even think you're going to get near Kosh. He'll wipe he'll obliterate your sorry asses in 2 seconds. Right, and even when they tried to take Kosh down, the Shadows did. It took 3 of them, and they didn't finish the job. Yeah, because he implanted part of himself into Sheridan. Right. So. Right. But yeah, this whole idea of, I can see this type of frame of thought becoming something that happens if we ever get out into deep space and we ever have contact with alien races. Shame that we haven't yet. But, I can honestly see this being something that would pop up in our society. Hold on 1 second. Sounds like he's swatting at mosquitoes. There's always going to be that underbelly. There's always going to be the one or two. The one that had a traumatic childhood, that had a bad example. They had something that started off without having the proper guidance, without having a mom and a dad together to help. I mean, sometimes there's one parent that does a really good job, but, usually there's got to be that influence that when someone experiences early childhood trauma, that helps guide them to understand it better. And those that don't get it have a tendency to have these issues later on. Or when they're an adult, they could have so many experiences and be lost in their own mind or isolated from other people that are going to give them good advice, to where they start listening to things that will try and save their ego, but in the process it's destroying their ability to relate with the rest of the universe on a good level, on a wholesome level, on an actual truthful level. They start believing the lies that get fed into their own mind.
Very true. And I think what Straczynski did with this episode was present a probable outcome from us finally having first contact, or having contact and having constant relations with alien races and everything, and seeing how that sort of thing can influence our society and our culture. And I, to a point, can understand what Briggs was saying, trying to retain what makes us human and what have you, but they carry it way too far, because for a culture and a society and for a species to evolve and grow, they need to a point accept outside influence and say, okay, what's good about this species that we can take and incorporate into ourselves, and what's bad about it and we need to avoid, and what have you. And I think that's a much more pragmatic point of view, rather than just saying, no, we just need to drive all aliens off of Earth. We need to get all aliens out of our culture entirely. And all that's going to do is stagnate your culture and your society and your people as a whole. Because consider just one race in particular, the Minbari. Yeah, they've a very strong warrior. They've got the warrior cast, but think about them just as spiritualists and philosophers and poets and artisans and what have you. Just think about that one facet of their whole culture that would be of a benefit to human society. And I would love to have seen, I don't know if any of the books touch on this or not, what the Interplanetary Alliance was like, and how you had this whole melting pot. I mean, think about it. The United States is considered a melting pot. Now you put that on a global scale, with Earth itself being the melting pot, where you've got so many different cultures and races coming to our world. And I mean, Shamayan herself says that she's going to Earth to present her poetry and what have you. And I think that's a great moment right there, because you've got aliens that are willing to travel that far from their own space to our little backwater, as Malondo calls it, backwater corner of the galaxy, to our little world, and share their art and their culture and their cultural spirit with us, and enrich us and enrich our society, and in a way make us better, make us smarter, make us more enlightened. And I think that's one of the better parts of this whole series and everything, and this episode in particular, is through that character of Shamayan. She is a traveling poet, an artisan, maybe even you could use the term bard and everything in some ways. And she's sharing her thoughts on society and culture through poetry. And it's performance poetry. So I don't know exactly how that would work. I would have loved to have seen her actually do it on screen, but you still get a pretty decent picture of what she does and everything in the episode.
Well, that's the thing about poets, whether it be performance art, whatever she said, because we do have some that are kind of like that here, where they'll, even weak attempts. The true poet. It was real interesting. You guys, most of you, hopefully have seen the movie Contact. Some people don't like the end of it. I kind of thought it was a good movie all the way. But when she finally got out into space and she started seeing all these different things that these aliens were showing her, And she realized she was the wrong person to go.
Mm-hmm.
She said they should have sent a poet. And
Yeah.
poets have a way of getting to the essence of things, whether they be things of the heart, things of the world, whether it be of political things or of natural things. They have a way of narrowing it down and reaching into people's minds and touching the part and reaching into their hearts and hitting those little strings and making you understand what they are saying. And there's another parallel too. I'm going to kind of get off of that just a hair.
Sure.
This
Go
is just
for it.
me blowing smoke again, but
No, go for
in
it.
our own world, we found that the greatest advancements that we have ever had is when people have been free to do so, free to express, free to write, free to do this, free to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And having the poet come to earth is another form of advancement. Like you said, the U.S. is a melting pot. Well, you could say the same for like any of the free nations, Australia, England. They kind of followed our suit. There was the Magna Carta, of course, but
yeah,
what happens in these societies where people are allowed to think outside of what is dictated by culture, they get better. We have words in the English language that are direct from other languages, but they help us express. And English is the most expressive language on the planet. Well, having the interaction with other species, other races, for those who have the mind that will listen to these poets. It doesn't have to be a poet, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
It makes your world, your life, your even thought process that much better. So the idea of, again, going back to people who fight against that, who have the inherent racism in them, close themselves off to a beauty that is beyond what even most of our best poets can even describe. We could see our own weaknesses by our inability to put into words or put into action those things that we feel. All right, off my soapbox.
No, David, that was very well said. I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. Because if you consider some of the great poetry that we have, that some of our great poets have written throughout the centuries, poetry is one of those, is ever changing, is ever evolving, but no matter how old a poem is, it can still evoke thoughts in the human mind and in the human soul. I mean, one of my favorite poets, and I have a few and everything, is Tennyson. I love Tennyson. I love Poe, Emily Dickinson, and even some of the epic poems written by Homer.
Kathia said it's more than poetry, but like I was trying, maybe I missed the point. I don't think poetry necessarily means just words. It doesn't just necessarily mean music. For me, it's a way of expressing, because some of you know that I used to be a professional musician before I got into chiropractic. And the thing about doing music was a good one, was being able to pull a part of you deep inside and have it come out in sound.
Yeah.
And the painter have it come out in sight.
Yes.
And it fits just along with what Kathia said, for the romance to come out in human interaction with heavy compassion. To me, it's all poetry. It's all light from one being shared with one or another. Yeah. It's giving of yourself in a way that is the most effective way and the most impactful way and the most honest way.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm not a huge fan of modern poetry. I find it somewhat dry. I find that it lacks heart in a lot of ways. That's why I go back to the classics. I'm a fan of classical poetry and everything. That's why I brought up Homer and why I brought up Emily Dickinson and Alfred Lord Tennyson and Edgar Allan Poe and what have you. Because those for me are they're foundational. They're formative for our society, for our culture. And they, in a lot of ways, can inspire modern poets, modern artists, and what have you themselves. And this whole idea of art being means for interspecies relations to be expressed in terms of the Babylon 5 universe is a very intriguing thing to me, because most every major culture we see on Babylon 5, whether it's the Narn or the Minbari or the Centauri or humans and everything, we have the artisans within our society and our culture, and they are revered. Okay, I don't want to say revered, but they are respected, and they are appreciated and even encouraged to create, because we realize that art is one of those things that feeds the human soul. And I think this was a great part of this episode and everything when Garibaldi is questioning Sean Mayan and says, do you know of anyone that would have a grudge against you? And she's like, well, some of my poetry may have caused debates of some heat, but they have never caused violent outbursts. And that's something that's very, very, very telling and everything of the Babylon 5 universe and everything, and particularly Minbari society, because you figure that they are a very peaceable, a very rational people, while very passionate, obviously. But the fact that they can have heated or lively debate and everything that is sparked by poetry, by art. And this episode itself and everything, it very much sparks debate about race relations. It sparks debate or conversation, more accurate term and everything. It sparks conversation about race relations. It sparks the question about which is more important, love or duty to one's society and one's culture in terms of the Centauri. And obviously, the other storyline here, is it wise to rekindle an old romance when you realize that romance may not be very positive for either person involved? And in this terms, Malcolm Briggs and Susan Ivanova, because in the end, when they're hauling Briggs and his compatriots off and everything back to Earth, and he's staying there very livid, very incensed. And he makes the comment, he's like, I can't believe you would sell me out for them. He's like, I thought I knew you. And Ivanova has one of her best comebacks in this episode. It's the very last line of dialogue. And she's like, I never knew you. And you're like, ouch, burn. But a very needed and very deserved burn by Susan Ivanova. And to the chat, J.L. Ferguson, welcome. Glad you tuned in this afternoon. Hope you we're going to be wrapping up here in a few minutes, but I hope you can catch us on the replay. I hope you enjoy the discussion, and thank you for tuning in. Appreciate it. So, any thoughts on what I just said?
No, I have to agree with you. It was, again, going back to that light and that few little bit of shadow. She didn't see the shadow that was in him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it came out. Here's something, and I'm not getting religious, because you guys all know I am a person of faith, but I try and leave it for other discussions. But there is one phrase that comes out of the Bible that Christ said, be as little children. Now, if you think of a little child, and again, just in the world perspective, and they don't have their shoes on, and yet they dance even though there's no music sometimes. But the world is a wonder. It's a place where you explore. You see, in one of my last chapters, I have that where a little kid is examining a bug that's eating a leaf, but the same goes for the rest of us. If we can put off the distractors, the things that affect our mind in ugly ways, and be able to dance. And I think this is, when I first saw this, I thought, this is an okay episode, and I started thinking about it, and I'm going, we're stuck inside, and those burdens for a lot of us have been relieved for a little bit, and a lot of people are thinking, what do we do? And I saw this thing where these people have come up with, it's amazing how the human mind works. One of these guys had set up this little restaurant, and he has it in French, and it's called the Crazy Nut, or the Nut House. And the squirrels and the birds come, and he's filming it, and people just love watching these animals because they got nothing else to do, but yet they're watching beauty. And another one where these people put a sign out along their walkway, and it's back to Monty Python, which we're getting to comedy, which is another way of expressing poetry, only it makes you smile, where the sign said, do a crazy walk in front of their house, and they have one of those doorbells that record things. There's different kinds. We have one. And so the people, when they come walking by, they'll do these crazy little walks or dances or silly steps, and they record it, and people are just eating this stuff up. So it's better that, in a lot of ways, that Susan didn't know him. Because now there's that darkness that came and became exposed. Sometimes it's best not to search that out. Now, sometimes you kind of have to protect your family or what have you. You have to know what's in the dark to stay in lighter areas, in brighter quarters, to be like the child where everything's a wonder, and where music touches you in places that you normally wouldn't listen to when you're stressed driving to work, or when someone says, I love you, and you can actually hear the words, not just go through the repeating process, but that little bit comes out. And that one part, and he did such a fantastic job of this, where Londo was repeating the phrase of his father, and he's kind of sitting in a chair, and he's looking up and says, and I've forgotten how to dance. You could see his acting ability was so phenomenal that it came through where, oh crap, have I done the same thing? It was awesome. I loved it.
But this episode had a lot of depth to it, and that's one of the things I love about all these about this series is you can watch it and just get the base of it, but if you really want to take the time like we have for the last almost 15 minutes and really delve down deep into this, it really helps you see all the aspects and everything of what Straczynski was trying to tell the watcher, tell the viewer. And that's a great thing about this show is in what seems to be somewhat of a creative wasteland and everything, and in some aspects that we are currently in right now, you can go back to a great show like Babylon 5 and look at the world and at the universe through the eyes of a creative mind and many creative minds, because it wasn't just Straczynski. I mean, yes, this was J. Michael Straczynski's brainchild and everything, but it took a lot of people and everything, not just the actors, but the crew and post production and everything to bring this vision to life. I've made this reference before. It's kind of like the opening monologue and everything when Sinclair's talking. And he's talking about the construction of Babylon 5. He says it's a dream given form. And this show is very much like that. It is a dream given form. It is one man's vision, one man's dream that was enacted and carried off by so many other people who loved this universe just as much as he did, to one extreme or another. So
right.
But
all too, and it's also we spent almost an hour talking about, probably, if you put all the little scenes together, maybe 12 minutes out of the whole show. And I know I could see Sis and Loki and a few of them that are writing these things, how they're impressed by it, and some of them may not even have seen it just because of what we've been talking about. But then there's other shows where you watch it and you step away and you don't even remember it. That's the difference between an artist and someone who's doing poetry for television and someone who's trying to make a buck. And I would prefer to sit there and watch the poetry. And this thing that we do every Monday, to me, it's more than just a show. It's reconnecting with a little bit of humanity that's expressed by J. Michael Straczynski and the actors and actresses who played their part. Yeah. And I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so do I. And to J.L. Ferguson, your comment, what do I mean by a creative wasteland? I would say that when I say a creative wasteland, I'm speaking more of modern Hollywood and what have you, because while there are small pockets where people are still being creative and are allowed to be able to express themselves creatively and what have you, there is a much larger swath of people who are just out to get a quick buck. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with making a profit. Far from it. I think capitalism is a good thing and what have you. But unfortunately, a lot of the passion, a lot of the love and everything that has gone into some series, I'm not saying all series, I'm not trying to lump everybody into one camp or anything, far from it. I'm saying there are still creative people in Hollywood and in the entertainment industry by and large, but unfortunately, they're being kneecapped in a lot of ways by these studios and by these other corporate bodies and everything, to where they can't fully express themselves creatively. That's what I mean by a creative wasteland. I believe in the next year or so, and I think even now, once the world comes out of lockdown, you're going to see an explosion of creativity like the which that we haven't seen in the last 100 years or more, maybe within the last 20 years.
There's probably a real good chance of that. But back to that point, and I see some of the comments, just think of it as if you had a polished piece of glass and a polished gemstone. And there's nothing wrong with a piece of glass. It just doesn't do it for you. You just leave it alone. It doesn't mean you have to come and smack it with a hammer. You don't have to curse at it every time you walk by. Just treasure the gemstone and ignore the other stuff. Yeah, people will find the same value that you do. They will see the gemstones and admire the beauty of that which is created by nature instead of things done by inferior hands.
Yes. And to Captain Spire, welcome. Glad you could pop in and everything. We're going to be wrapping up here in a few minutes, so feel free to catch us on the replay. But Captain Spire brings up a very, very good comment here. I mean, I think this is true of any show that you have watched from the very beginning and you've grown attached to, and you've grown a connection with these characters, with a group of characters and what have you, and they've almost become a part of your life in a manner of speaking. And that was true of Babylon 5. I mean, for me, that last episode and everything in season 5, Sleeping in Light, it was beautiful. It was very heart-wrenching, very heartbreaking, and what have you. But at the same time, it was kind of time to say goodbye, even though you don't want to. And and the other series from the other two series for me that were very much like that were Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel and everything. And I know we got the comic book continuation of both of those series and everything, but you have this emotional tie to these characters like you do in Babylon 5. And you don't want to say goodbye, but at the same time you realize, hey, somewhere down the road I can pick up this series on DVD or Blu-ray or digital or whatever, and I can come back and revisit my friends. And I can revisit these stories that were so inspirational and so informative for me. And Kathia, yeah, I would agree with all four of those. Identity, value, purpose, and belonging. Yes. Oh, Kathia, don't forget, you got a Buffy nut right here sitting to the left, your right of Adega. So if you're wanting help, let me know. So
one thing too, I know I said with the piece of glass, I do appreciate those people who point out glass from gemstones. Don't get me wrong. You'll have these people that say this doesn't adhere to canon. I don't like it because of these reasons. I appreciate that, because if you're walking down a road and there's a big old pile of, what do they call it, bovine ejecta, it's nice when someone says, sidestep that. You don't want to get that in between your toes.
So, yeah. Well, folks, I think we're going to wrap it up here and everything. I want to thank Adega, as always, for being a man this afternoon. I appreciate it as always. We will be continuing this next Monday afternoon at 12 and what have you. And we'll be reviewing A Sky Full of Stars from Season 1, so be sure to tune in for that. I have included the link to Adega's channel. Well, I included one of the playlists to his channel and everything, so make sure and click on over there if you are not currently up on his newest work and everything, Children of the Directive. And if you like what he has to say, and I, for one, fully endorse this guy. He has a very creative mind, and I very much respect him. Consider subscribing to his channel. Let's get him to 200, folks. Let's do it. And as for myself, this Wednesday night at 7:30 Central, we'll have the Wednesday edition of Ambassadorial Wing, and we'll be reviewing John Borman's Excalibur. So be sure to tune in for that. And then, of course, this Saturday night, we'll have Ambassadorial Wing once again. And this week, we're going to be discussing 3 entries from the DCEU. We're going to be talking about Aquaman, Shazam, and the Joker. I'm getting my panel put together for that. So that will be at 7:30 Central Time as well. So be sure and tune in for that. And y'all have a good afternoon. You take it easy. And until next time, this is the Ambassador, Adega, signing off.
Thanks for stopping by.